More action to review with this week's episode of Alien Earth. Let's talk about it. Hey, great to have you here. So today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of Alien Earth. I realized I'm way late on this. I'm probably the last person to do the review of this episode. I think a lot of people did episode 1 and 2 combined, but I still kind of try to do them separate, even though we had 2 releases in this first week. After this, we'll be on schedule for 1 episode per week, so a little bit easier at that point. But let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump right into the episode details here. So we open things up with Joe and his group of search and rescue soldiers, and they're continuing to realize that these crash victims didn't actually die in the crash, and Joe also knows that alien life forms were involved. We then get a scene with Cavalier, this trillionaire genius, and Sylvia, one of the women that we saw in the first episode as well, that was kind of doing the experiment stuff with Wendy. And Cavalier here is talking about there being an intelligence race going on here. Sylvia mentions making customers immortal, and then we have Cavalier claim it's not about the money. He just wants somebody to talk to that's smarter than him, and really kind of downgrade Sylvia in that conversation. And he just hopes that Wendy could be that person that he can have those conversations with. We then shift over to Wendy in the children team, and Wendy tells one of the other kids on board named Slightly about her brother. She wants him to keep this a secret, but he immediately blabs like a typical kid would to one of the other kids on board. And then back with Joe and his 2 colleagues on their rescue mission. They run into a gap in the stairwell and need to jump across. The first 2 do so, but then Joe's the last one, and as he's thinking about doing it, he hears some noise from above him, and sure enough, the xenomorph comes pouncing down. He tries to jump across. The xenomorph swipes at him though, and he winds up falling down to a lower level, and then immediately runs through the hallway into an elevator, barely escaping the alien. I don't know if that elevator door really would have shut that quickly. That would have been a hazard, I feel like, but it's fine for this show. We then see a flashback of Joe trying to get out of his contract. He's speaking to this AI and says to let him out of the contract or face his fury. And Wendy, who's pretty much been constantly watching Joe, hacks in and says, "Face your furry what?" Which he's pretty confused by, but it's a reference to Ice Age that they both watched when they were younger. And the ultimate outcome of the scene is that Joe gets his request rejected and is stuck being a medic. We do then finally have the kids arrive at the crash scene, and then Wendy immediately looks for her brother on the screen so she can go save him. Kirsch, Timothy Olyphant's character, who is this synth, then has the kid from earlier Slightly join Wendy while the rest of them follow Kirsch. And then back with Cavalier, that trillionaire who runs Prodigy, gets a call from Yutani, who owns that ship that crashed. And they argue for a little bit when she asks for her ship and cargo back, but he says it landed in his territory and let the lawyers settle things. He then immediately realizes he wants whatever's on that ship. Kirsch's group winds up finding the lab, and he leaves one of the kids with this plant Venus flytrap-like species on the ceiling in the hallway. I'm pretty curious what's going to happen to somebody when they encounter that thing, because you know that's definitely something that someone's going to wind up walking under. It's going to wind up grabbing somebody. And the other kids that go in the lab see the 2 dead soldiers from last episode, and the creature that sucked up their blood crawls away. We then get a pretty gnarly scene with this torn up cat that's crawling towards them, and then the eyeball pops out and charges at them until they finally trap it under this box. And then back over with Joe, he's trying to reconvene with his team, but nobody's responding to his radio calls, but he does wind up running into another one of his allies. They wind up going and knocking on the door of one of the apartments there, where this guy and his friends are having this party with ridiculous costumes. Feels like they were trying to lean a little bit into the humor, but also pretty graphic scene as well that we're about to get here. He winds up claiming that Cavalier would have called him if they had to evacuate, and slams the door on Joe and the soldier, pretty much being like, "Don't bother me, not a big deal." Kind of strange. I feel like they would have heard the explosions and the crashing going on outside, but trying to be funny, as I said. And after he closes the door on them, Joe winds up banging on the door again, and we have the xenomorph come out here and grab that soldier, who just starts firing his gun everywhere, just bullets going everywhere. All hell is breaking loose at this point. The goofy looking guy in the costume winds up opening the door, and I'm kind of thinking here that the bullets are going to wind up shooting that guy, but that doesn't happen. Instead, the xenomorph throws the soldier at Joe and lands on top of his body, and then the alien runs in and kills everybody in the apartment. We even wind up seeing the guy who answered the door, who was all dressed up, cut in half, and his upper body's just crawling away. We then get another pretty cool scene of the xenomorph jumping at Joe from the 2nd floor, jumping off this balcony and this chandelier situation. And the alien pretty much has Joe dead to rights here. He's gonna get eaten until the plot armor comes in to save the day, and that cyborg named Morrow, who wound up crashing the ship here on Earth, shoots the alien and stunning it for the time being. Morrow then winds up shooting Joe with that same electrical weapon and puts this foam-looking spiderweb thing around the alien to drag it away. On top of Joe surviving this alien encounter, it is pretty convenient here that Morrow doesn't wind up killing Joe, even though he killed some others previously. But then again, the 2 soldiers from the last episode, I guess he's just left there to die. And now back with Kirsch and the kids, they wind up showing him that cat eyeball thing. Kirsch then plugs himself into the ship there and discovers what we as the audience have known all along, that this was a research vessel collecting specimens. And then back with Morrow, dragging the alien through the hallways. He winds up going to the elevator and is met with a group of soldiers who tell him not to move. And he's kind of warning them here, being like, you don't know what you're doing, just let me go. Suddenly the alien breaks out and kills all of them except for Morrow. And I don't really know for sure how the alien broke out so easily. If this wasn't going to happen soon with Morrow, how did the alien break out at this moment? Not entirely sure. Morrow does mention that the alien can sense their fear, so maybe that woke it up and allowed it to break out. It is a bit strange though that the xenomorph winds up letting Morrow go, that cyborg, even though back on the ship, he really charged at him and wanted to kill him. But maybe seeing humans available here is that reason. But regardless, we look behind Morrow and see that the room is full of torn apart bodies and blood everywhere. So definitely pretty heavy on the carnage in this episode. Granted, a lot of it is kind of in the background of things. And then quickly cutting back to that kid who's at that ceiling plant, it does start to approach him with its tentacle, but ultimately doesn't decide to act here. So I do think at some point we're going to see somebody, probably a human, wind up getting attacked by this thing. Kirsch winds up identifying a room on the ship that he wants to make sure is secure. So he has the kids head to this egg room and really hold things down there. And now back over with Wendy and Slightly. They wind up encountering the room that we just saw that cyborg Morrow in. I'm kind of surprised that they're not freaking out seeing blood everywhere, but I guess going on this rescue mission, they kind of expected it, even though they are kids. We then get a pretty weird scene where Joe gets up and goes into this room that has a Reggie Jackson signed baseball in it, and he starts reliving memories with his dad of Reggie Jackson hitting 3 home runs in Game 6 for the World Series. In this kind of side plot with Joe and baseball, I'm not really sure I'm fully understanding why it's here and the importance of it yet, but I'm sure we're going to get more of this as we go along. I believe he's named after Joe DiMaggio, so definitely some baseball tie-ins with his upbringing, but I'm not quite sure yet how it's going to play a role in the actual plot of this story with him and Wendy. Suddenly, though, Wendy and Slightly show up here, but Wendy doesn't tell Joe that she's his sister yet, and we get a few more strange baseball conversations here, where Joe tells Wendy that they called Reggie Jackson Mr. October. We'll see how that all winds up playing into the story, though. Maybe it'll be like signs where they're like, swing away, Joe. We do also get a little bit more of that kid comedy that I think a lot of people weren't a big fan of, where Slightly mentions there's a bear on the loose, obviously talking about the xenomorph. And at first, Joe thinks that Slightly and Wendy are synthetic, but they mention to him there's something different. And suddenly we have Kirsch call Wendy and say to get to the front of the ship to lock down that egg room with the others. And while walking there, Slightly once again blabs and tells Joe that they're kids in new bodies and that Wendy is actually Marcy, which was her child name that he knows. We then get a few moments of Joe grilling Wendy, and she passes all of the tests, remembering every memory that he throws at her. He does finally realize that it's her and embraces her before heading into this egg room. And once inside, Joe pretty foolishly puts his face up to one of the eggs. I'm just thinking, facehugger is going to jump out and just grab you. And then he's standing in front of this hole in the wall. The xenomorph suddenly then pops out and tackles Joe through that hole, once again falling down to a lower level with him and the xenomorph. Wendy freaks out and wants to rush after Joe and tells Slightly to watch the eggs, or as she words it, guard the omelet. And that wraps up this episode, so a bit of a cliffhanger to end things on. We then fade to black with a Tool song playing, which it does seem like a lot of people aren't fans of the song choices we've gotten in these first couple episodes, but I enjoy rock music, so while it's a bit out of place, I'm fine with it. And now looking at an overall score here, on a scale of negative, neutral, or positive for this episode, episode 2, I'll say while pretty high at some points, gets a neutral rating, but it's definitely on the higher end of neutral. It's kind of in that in-between area between neutral and positive for me, slightly worse than the prior episode. I did like pretty much all the xenomorph moments that we had in this episode, and we had quite a few. The Wendy and Joe relationship storyline, I'm not completely sold on yet, and we definitely had a bit of plot armor with that cyborg Morrow, and especially Joe here. I'm fine with that though, since the rest of the show has been so strong, as long as they don't do it too many more times, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where things head next. So that wraps up my thoughts on episode 2 of Alien Earth. If you've watched it, what'd you think? What parts did you like or dislike? What do you think of our main characters so far? Did the alien scenes work for you? Or did the carnage happen too much in the background? Let me know your thoughts on all things alien down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.